Is there one thing that comes to your mind now? That you say,
Well, now, I mean, everyone who travels, like, people from the States often talk about kind of, like, in the States, the customer's always right, and there's a very sort of, business, it's like capitalism kind of to the extreme, and sort of it's a service-based industry, kind of, or the service industries, the mantra is the customer's always right, and, like, fast food this, and if you go to Germany and you go to Starbucks, then, like, take a break, man, because there ain't nothing happening fast at Starbucks in Germany, in my experience. Like, it's not, it's a different model, because I think in other cultures, fast food isn't what it is in the States, where in the States it's like, because you're in, you're out, and in other places it's like, no, this is an experience, like you're having a cup of coffee, relax, take your time. So if you live there long enough, you'd be like, yeah, they're right, man, you should take your time. Like, they're right to slow this down, because everything shouldn't be so fast. But if you first leave the States and go to something like that, you're like, hey, man, hurry up. I'm used to things going like this. Yeah. And then you go to other places where, again, that's kind of the service industry will just be different. That's a small example. But.
And then music-wise?
But I wanted to say, actually, kind of, because in a much more interesting way than what I was just describing, I think musically, learning different languages had an impact on my lyrics, because you learn the different ways that the same things can be expressed. And also, like, I lived in Spain and I lived in Mexico, and even though that's both Spanish, the slang that they have in Spain is its own thing, and the slang they have in Mexico is its own thing. And wordplay in Mexico and the kind of youth sort of lingo is it's really fascinating in Spain, but there's something about it in Mexico that really spoke to me. I mean, there's like very clever use of wordplay in the lingo in Mexico.
Do you have an example, maybe?
It's fun. It's hard to say. Like, in Spain, people have a kind of an aggressive mode of speech. It's a little bit assertive and sort of like, joder, tío, and in Mexico, it's a little more sing-songy, and things have like a playful quality to it, and so that just translates. The slang in Spain is sort of violent and grotesque, and the slang in Mexico is a little bit more flippant and funny, and just sort of like switching meanings around and using words that sound like one thing to signify other things, and there's just like people have fun. And anyway, that sort of gives you an insight. Learning slang in Mexico gave me insight on the slang in Spain, and both of those things gave me insight into slang in English, and just the way that sentence structures and romance languages and I don't know. I think on that level, it gave me some insight into the way that language can be manipulated, and it's fun.
It's fun, but I think it's also interesting to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have an example of a way that slang, that you use slang or different meaning on this album? Wordplay?
No. Not particularly, but then I kind of feel like, because I've often used bad grammar on purpose in songs and things like that, which are fun to me, because I like the way that that's sort of part of slang is often kind of deconstructive and rebellious. There's a rebelliousness to slang, and so I kind of, in that spirit, I've often made intentional grammatical errors and things like that. On this record, yeah, I morph into some hip-hop lingo at one point, which was just very gratifying to me to do that. I can't think of too many specific examples.
Maybe we'll come to it. Julian Plenti, do I pronounce it right?
Yeah.
When did you come up with this name?
Julian's my middle name, and Plenti was sort of like my porno alter ego name.
Why porno alter ego?
Because I do a lot of things because I think they're funny, and I think an interesting point of my career is that a lot of people haven't seemed to notice that I was, having fun with what I was doing. I think they think I take things really seriously, but so much of what I've done in my mind has been, tongue-in-cheek or hilarious. In my private way, Plenti with an I is hilarious, but I don't know if people really,
Does it bother you that people don't seem to get it sometimes?
I think a lot of stuff bothered me in the beginning. Now I get it. I just understand that people don't get it, and maybe, I get a keen sense that fans, they get it, but I think critics or people that aren't really looking too closely at it or are not invested in it enough to investigate and get a feel for it, they don't see it. So they just think I'm probably like pompous and depressed, and like that is not really who I am at all. Depressed maybe, but not so much pompous.
Okay. The Plenti name.
The Plenti name, yeah. So that was also like I never really pegged myself or looked at myself as a performer. I think I like making art, but the performance side of things was always a little strange for me. So I kind of gravitated in the early days to having an alter ego and a stage name and sort of trying to inhabit that idea of a public face to the art by having that abstraction of a, you know, plus there's a long history of doing that thing, you know, stage names. So before Interpol even got off the ground, I was using that stage name. I almost used my stage name in Interpol, and then the band kind of collectively decided that we would all use our real names, but I was going to be Julian Plenti in the band. So the reason why I did my first record as Julian Plenti was because I basically had these songs before the band, before Interpol took off, and I just kind of left them there. And I told myself, okay, you're no longer, I was originally just going to be a solo artist, and then I got sort of seduced into being into this band because I loved what they were doing. But I told myself at the time that I joined Interpol, like, okay, you need to come back to this and finish what you started and like follow through, because this is really your identity. This is what you know, this is what you said you were going to do. So you have to come back to this. So after 3 records with Interpol, with Interpol, and 10 years later, I kind of said, you now need to go back to that thing that you said you were going to do. And it was important for me to do it in the way that I had originally intended. And the way I originally intended to do it was as Julian Plenti. And because there was going to be material on the record that I'd written and performed as Julian Plenti, like On the Esplanade and Fly As You Might, Fun That We Have, and there's one more. Fly As You Might, On the Esplanade, Fun That We Have. Come on. Oh, Girl on the Sporting News. Those were all like, songs from an earlier time, like when I was in college, when I was much younger, when I was Julian Plenti. And because I wanted to put those out, and I promised myself that I would do my original idea, so I did my original idea. And it was just like this kind of OCD need to do it the way that I'd originally set out to do it.